I remember the sound of metal tearing, the sky going black, and then everything stopped, panicked. But what I saw after that Friday flight was not death. It was the future after October 31st, 2025.
My name is Captain Mark Reynolds, and on October 17, 2025, for 11 minutes, my heart stopped.
Serious. I was a commercial pilot for nearly 17 years. I was born and raised in Austin, Texas, the son of a mechanic and a Sunday school teacher. My mother prayed for me every morning before school. My father believed faith should be quiet and practical, something proven by how a man lives, not what he says. Excited. For years I tried to balance both, the quiet faith of my father and the fiery prayers of my mother. Somewhere between long flights, hotel rooms, and late-night drinks with the crew, that balance broke. I still called myself Christian, but in truth, God had become background noise. Relaxed. I had success, respect, and a pilot's confidence that I could handle anything. Yet behind the uniform and the smile, I carried a restlessness I could not explain. There was pride, a quiet arrogance that told me I was in control. I read scripture only when life felt rough. I prayed mostly when I was scared. Sometimes when turbulence hit, I would whisper, "Lord, just get us through this one." Then the plane would steady, and I would go right back to autopilot, not just in the sky, but in my soul, joyful. The church choir still sang on Sundays. Coffee still brewed in my kitchen before every early flight. Everything looked normal, but deep down, something in me was already drifting, excited. And I did not know that a storm far greater than any I had flown through was waiting just ahead, one that would silence every engine, every heartbeat, and every illusion of control. Excited, because soon, I would leave this world for 11 minutes, and what I would see there would change everything I believed about life, death, and what comes after October 31. Excited. After that Friday flight on the 10th of October 2025, I began to notice little things, signs, maybe that something inside me was shifting. The weather reports felt heavier, serious. The skies I used to trust began to look unpredictable, almost watchful. My crew noticed it too. "Cap, you good?" my co-pilot Aaron asked one night as we prepared for a red-eye to Denver. "Yeah, just tired," I said. But I was not tired. I was unsettled. The last few weeks before the crash were filled with small, sharp moments that kept piercing through my calm facade. A sermon snippet playing on a random radio station. What shall it profit a man to gain the whole world? A dream of falling through clouds, reaching for light I could not grasp. And once during pre-flight check, I heard a whisper, not through the headset, but deep within, saying, "Are you ready?" I laughed it off. Pilots trust instruments, not whispers. Still, every night, as the cockpit lights dimmed and the engines roared, I felt a strange fear that had no name. It was not fear of death, it was fear of truth. If everything I believed was real, then maybe I had been living asleep. At home, things grew colder. My marriage was fading. My teenage daughter barely spoke to me. I blamed my schedule, the stress, the long hours. But deep down, I knew the problem was not distance, it was absence. My heart was somewhere else. One Sunday, I tried going back to church. I sat in the back row, alone, still wearing my flight jacket. When the pastor read from Ephesians 5:14, "Awake, you who sleep," I felt my chest tighten. It was the same verse my mother had underlined in her old Bible. I almost stood up, but pride pinned me to the pew. I told myself, later, I will fix things later. That word later became my favorite excuse, and it nearly cost me eternity. Sometimes I wonder how many of us live that way, saying we will make things right later, without realizing that later may never come. If you are watching this right now, I want you to be real with yourself for a moment. What is the one thing you keep putting off because you think you still have time? Whose call have you been avoiding? What truth have you been too afraid to face? Write it in the comments, not for me, but for yourself. Sometimes writing it down is how awakening begins. Because for me, later ended at 8:43 p.m. Mid-flight, when when the storm ahead turned from gray to black and the instruments began to scream. And that was the night everything stopped. The storm that night did not look unusual at first. We had flown through worse, but as we approached the Colorado line, the clouds began to stack higher than radar showed, like dark towers swallowing the horizon. Aaron glanced at the screen. That cell is building faster than forecasted. I see it, I said. We'll divert 10 degrees east. But even as I spoke, lightning cracked across the windshield. Not the usual flash, but a solid sheet of white that hung in the air for a full second, too long to be natural. For a moment, I felt everything pause, the hum of the engines, the chatter in my headset, even my heartbeat. Then it hit, a deafening explosion of sound and light, the cockpit filled with alarms, stall warning, hydraulic fail. Erin's voice cracked. We've lost engine 2. I grabbed the yoke, fighting to keep her level. Rain hammered against the glass like stones. The altimeter spun downward. Mayday, Mayday, this is Flight 71 Charlie. No response, just static. I could feel sweat running down my neck. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the raw force of the storm throwing the aircraft like a toy. Somewhere between 10,000 and 8,000 feet, the cabin lights flickered, then dimmed completely, and in that sudden darkness, something inside me broke. I shouted without thinking, God, not like this. But another voice in me whispered, you never had time for him before, why now? For a split second, my life unrolled in flashes. My daughter's first flight, my mother's funeral, the empty chair at church, the glass of whiskey on my nightstand. The cockpit felt smaller with every breath. The air tasted like burning metal and guilt. Aaron's voice was fading. We are losing altitude, and then I felt it, the left wing tearing free, the aircraft spiraling, a sound like the sky itself splitting in half. We were going down, the pressure slammed me forward, everything went white. My last thought was not of the plane, or the passengers, or even of dying. It was regret, not fear, just the unbearable knowledge that I had wasted my chances to make peace. And then, silence. At first I thought I was still in the cockpit. But there was no sound, no wind, no alarms, no rain, just weightless stillness. I tried to move, but I could not feel my body. When I looked down, I saw it, the wreckage below, fire licking through twisted metal, paramedics running through rain, Aaron's body motionless beside mine, and I realized I was outside myself. Panic rose, but it was quiet, not a scream, more like a deep ache of knowing. I tried to shout, but no sound came. Then I saw a blur of people, rescue lights flashing red and blue, and one of them yelling, "We've got no pulse." That was me. I watched as they pulled me from the wreck, my face gray, eyes half open. One paramedic started chest compressions. Another shouted for the defibrillator. Each jolt looked violent, too violent for something that no longer hurt. And yet, I felt every memory ripple with each shot. Every regret surfaced, every lie, every sin, every careless word. It was as if truth itself was pressing against me, not condemning, but undeniable. I wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. Then, a strange darkness began to move around me, not empty but alive, whispering. The whispers grew clearer. Voices, some angry, some mocking, repeating my own words back to me. You said later, they echoed, like thunder, until I could not bear it. I covered my ears though I had no hands, and still they spoke. Then, through that noise, a small light appeared ahead, faint but steady. It did not shine like fire or lightning. It felt like peace. And when I looked toward it, the whispers grew distant, like waves retreating from shore. Excited, I began to move, not walking, not flying, just drawn. Each moment felt like both a step and a surrender. I looked once more at my lifeless body below. Paramedics still working, my daughter's face flashing across my mind, and I whispered, "If this is death, please let there be mercy." The light grew stronger. It began to pull me through what looked like a tunnel of living gold, every surface pulsing with warmth. The farther I went, the more the pain faded, the guilt, the fear, the storm, all dissolved like mist. And then, in the silence, I heard it, a voice, clear, gentle, stronger than thunder, yet softer than breath. It called my name, Michael. Everything stopped, and I knew, whoever was waiting in that light, it was not a dream, and it was not my imagination. It was him. The moment that voice spoke my name, the tunnel exploded into living light. Not blinding, but knowing. It wasn't just around me, it was inside me, reading every thought I ever hid. I wanted to move, to speak, but my soul felt naked before something infinitely pure. Then a shift, the brightness dimmed, and suddenly I was standing on a plain that stretched endlessly in all directions. The air was thick, heavy, and filled with the sound of countless cries. Shapes moved in the distance, shadows, not of darkness, but of absence. There was no fire like in the movies, only an emptiness so deep it burned. People were there, millions, but none could see each other. Each one was trapped inside memories of everything they thought didn't matter. Their regret was the fire. I felt it pierce me even though I wasn't one of them. I tried to step back, but I couldn't, and then a voice beside me said, "This is where pride leads when love is refused." I turned, and that's when I saw him. Jesus was standing there, radiant yet gentle, his presence pushing the darkness back like the sun after a storm. The light from him didn't just shine, it healed. My knees gave way. I couldn't look directly at him. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, trembling. He looked toward the lost multitudes and said softly, "Because mercy is only understood when you see what it rescues you from." I wept, not because I was condemned, but because I deserved to be. And then he reached out, and the whole landscape of sorrow dissolved like smoke. In an instant we stood above the earth. Below us, cities pulsed with restless light, people chasing things that faded even as they touched them. I saw men shouting over screens, families asleep while their children cried in silence, leaders guiding nations, blinded by their own ambition. Everywhere, noise. And beneath the noise, souls drifting quietly toward that same emptiness I had just seen. I turned to him. "They don't even know, do they?" He shook his head. "Few do. The world believes awakening is pain, but it is actually mercy." Then a vision opened before me, the date October 31, 2025 flashing like a warning. The world looked peaceful on the surface, but beneath it, hearts were trembling. I saw sudden losses, confusion spreading, voices twisting truth into fear. And yet in the midst of it, lights began to rise. Ordinary people, small acts of compassion, prayers whispered in dark rooms. I asked, "What does this mean?" He said, "A wave is coming. It will shake many, but those who awaken will become my hands in the storm. You must tell them." Tears blurred my vision. "I'm not worthy. I've wasted so much time." He looked straight into me, not with anger, but with a love so intense it hurt. "You were chosen because you understand sleep. Now go and wake the others." His words pierced deeper than any command I've ever received. Then he added quietly, "Tell them I am not far. Tell them mercy still stands, but not forever ignored." I felt something like wind, not of air but of spirit, pull me backward. The horizon of heaven folded around him like gold returning to the sun. The last thing I heard was his voice, "Awake and tell them what you've seen." Then everything collapsed into silence. The brightness shattered into 1,000 fragments. Pain shot through my chest. I heard a distant voice yelling, "We've got him back. Pulse is steady." And I realized I was breathing again. The world was loud, cold, and fragile. But this time I was awake. The first thing I heard was chaos, thunder of rain, and the crackle of fire. Voices, sirens, and the frantic rhythm of machines forcing air into my lungs. Then pain, sharp, tearing, dragging me back from the silence I thought was forever. "Pulse, we have a pulse," someone shouted. I gasped. The air burned. It was cold, wet, metallic, but it was life. The light above me was not heavenly anymore. It was the glare of emergency lamps cutting through smoke and darkness. I was lying on the ground, surrounded by twisted metal and the scent of jet fuel. Rain was falling through a broken fuselage. I opened my eyes to flashing red lights, twisted metal, and the faint smell of jet fuel. The storm was still raging. I was lying on wet ground, wrapped in foil blankets, paramedics kneeling over me. One of them whispered, "How is he breathing?" He was gone. All I could hear were faint echoes of what I had just seen. The lost souls, the voice of Jesus, the words, "Tell them what you have seen." They airlifted me to St. Luke's Medical Center. Hours later, I woke up again, this time in a hospital ICU. I tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. I was alive, but everyone else was not. I drifted in and out, pain, sirens, then the long white corridor that smelled of smoke and antiseptic. When I woke again, the world was still. Machines beeped beside me, steady, relentless. The doctor leaned in. "Captain Reynolds, can you hear me? You are the sole survivor of Flight 302. Tubes in my arms, bandages across my chest, and silence. And memories of Aaron flashed through my mind. His last glance before the cockpit lights exploded. The flight attendants, the passengers, the families who had trusted me to get them home. Gone. Tears slipped down my face before I even knew I was crying. "Why me?" I whispered. "Why not them?" No answer came. Only the slow, steady beep of the heart monitor, reminding me that each beat was borrowed mercy. The words hit harder than the crash itself. "Sole survivor." I turned my head, tubes tugging at my skin, and whispered, "What about my crew? Aaron?" The doctor looked away. "I'm sorry." Hours later, the door burst open. My wife stood there, pale, trembling, her face streaked with tears. Behind her, 2 airline officials and a chaplain. They had come to confirm what they thought was impossible. She froze at the sight of me, alive, breathing, whispering her name. For a second, no one moved. Then she ran to the bedside, covering her mouth, sobbing. "Mark, they said you were gone. They told me everyone was gone." I wanted to hold her, but the IV lines tangled between us. All I could do was stare into her eyes, the same eyes I had taken for granted for years, and whisper, "He gave me back." The nurses stood quietly in the doorway, some crying. Even the doctor wiped his eyes. They called it a miracle. Reporters later called it the man who came back from the sky. But I knew better. It was not luck, not coincidence. It was mercy and a message. That night, when everyone left and the ward fell silent, I stared at the ceiling lights and whispered, "Why me?" No answer came, only the echo of that divine voice. "Tell them I am not far. Tell them mercy still stands." The beeping of the heart monitor felt like heaven's reminder, each tone a borrowed heartbeat, each breath a command. When my wife returned in the morning, she brought a Bible that belonged to my mother. It fell open on its own to Ephesians 5:14. "Awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light." I closed my eyes. This was not survival. This was assignment. As the sun rose over the hospital courtyard, I whispered, "All right, Lord, I will tell them. Every one of them." The machines hummed beside me, steady as a promise. The world would call it survival. I would call it awakening. Recovery was slower than I expected. Every movement reminded me that my body had been broken and rebuilt. But the real healing was deeper, inside the space between my heartbeat and my memory. Each morning my wife sat by the bed, reading short psalms in a shaky voice. Sometimes she would stop mid-verse and just cry. I never rushed her. Before the crash, I was always the one checking my watch. Now, I just listened. When the hospital allowed visitors, pastors, friends, even strangers came. Some just wanted to see the man who had died and returned. Others came hoping to touch a miracle. But I kept telling them, "Do not look at me, look at what mercy can still do." After 3 weeks, I was moved to a rehab wing. Learning to walk again was harder than learning to fly. My legs trembled, my breath came short, But every time I stumbled, I remembered the faces of those I had seen and the voice that said, "Awake and tell them." That memory became my strength. News stations kept calling. They all wanted to know the same thing. How did you survive when no one else did? Can you remember what happened before the crash? And the question that always came last, asked with lowered voices, as if afraid of the answer, what did you see on the other side? During one live interview, the lights were hot and the studio air smelled like metal and coffee. The reporter leaned forward and said, "Captain Reynolds, experts are calling this a miracle, but you were clinically dead for 11 minutes. What happened at that time? Can you describe it?" For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me feared they would laugh or twist the story into something sensational. But then, just beneath the noise of cameras clicking, I heard it again, that same whisper that had brought me back. "Speak truth, not comfort." So I took a breath and said slowly, "I saw what waits when a soul drifts too far from mercy. I saw the danger of sleeping through grace. And I saw a hand light itself, still reaching, waiting for us to wake." The room went silent. No one moved, even the reporter lowered his eyes for a moment, as if searching for words that wouldn't come. When the segment ended, no one clapped, they just stared. But that night, hundreds of messages filled my inbox, people saying something in their spirit shifted when they heard those words. Many said they couldn't explain it, only that they suddenly felt the need to pray again, maybe for the first time in years. But emails started pouring in, hundreds from people saying they felt something shift just hearing those words. Back home, the first night was strange. Our house felt different, quieter, heavier. There were condolence letters piled on the porch, flowers from people who thought my wife had become a widow. We sat together on the living room floor, surrounded by those reminders of death, and decided to live differently. We prayed not rehearsed prayer but raw, clumsy gratitude. It was the first honest prayer we had said together in years. In the weeks that followed, I began recording short videos. Not polished sermons, just testimony. Sometimes I shared from my hospital chair, other times from the backyard at sunset. I spoke about mercy, about awakening, about the danger of living half alive. Within days, people began writing from around the world. Pilots, nurses, truck drivers, college students. Some said they had been about to give up on life. Others said they had felt asleep in faith until hearing the story. One message broke me completely. It was from a woman whose husband had been on my flight. She wrote, "Knowing you saw Jesus gives me peace that he is safe." I wept until I could not breathe. Her forgiveness became part of my healing. Soon churches started calling, small ones at first, then larger congregations. I shared from pulpits, from recovery centers, even in hangars where pilots gathered to hear what I had learned in the clouds between life and eternity. I always ended the same way. "I was sent back to tell you, mercy still stands, but it will not wait forever. Wake up while breath is still yours." My marriage began to mend. My daughter started coming to church again. And every time I looked at her during worship, I thought of all the people still lost in noise and routine, believing they would make things right later. I prayed they would hear before the storm came. One night after a service, a young man approached me. He said, "Captain, I don't know if I believe in all this, but something in your eyes makes me want to." I smiled and said, "That something isn't me, it's mercy calling your name." He nodded, tears falling before he could speak. Now every video I post, every crowd I face, I ask the same thing. If this story moved you, help me reach others who are still asleep. Share it with at least 2 people, 2 hearts that need hope. I do not tell these things to be known. I tell them because I was dead, and yet I live, and living carries a debt to awaken others before it is too late. Some nights I still wake up to that silence, the same one that came right before the crash. And every time I remember what I saw, people running out of time without even knowing it. So let me ask you something real. When was the last time you sat alone and asked yourself what truly matters? When did you last say "I love you" and mean it, without rushing, without pride? Is there someone you still need to forgive? Something you keep saying you will fix later? How long has your heart been tired, but you keep pretending you are fine? And if the world stopped tonight, right now, who would you wish you had spoken to one more time? This is not about religion, it is about awakening. You still have breath, you still have mercy, you still have time right now. Take a moment, breathe. If something in you feels heavy, do not scroll past this moment. Write in the comments what you know you must let go of, or who you need to reach out to. And type "Awaken me, Lord," if you are ready for peace again. Lord, touch every heart that paused here,